This is the July 2nd, 2025 meeting of the Energy Advisory Committee. Take the roll. Here. Tom Rooney. Here. Kevin Charette. Here. Peter Sumsich. Here. Betsy Blaisdell is not here. Tracy Cameron had a conflict tonight. And Antonio was not here tonight. So I think our major topic tonight is the latest rates from CPC&H. Tom, we look forward to hearing what you learned on the director's call. And then we've got a draft press release was the last page in your packet. Chance to read that. And we had a CPC&H press release as well, which did go out.
They posted it to the website, so it's exactly the same announcement that they sent, that you shared with the committee.
Okay.
Issued as press release.
So that's out as of late afternoon. That our plan is to communicate to our residents about that. Then quick updates on Jones Avenue. Next steps. Meeting we had with the Island Institute. And we can update you on the NREL report. We're getting closer to a document, we think. But there's more conversations to have with them. So we do have minutes to approve. Has everyone had a chance to read them?
I did.
Good. Have one. Any changes, deletions, emendations? Entertain a motion. So. Okay, second.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
They were, as usual, great minutes, Stephanie, thank you. So, Tom, maybe you can fill us in on what the director's meeting was like Thursday and set the rates. He's been read into a coalition space.
Okay. So one of the things that I learned, the level of detail that was in the packet that came out from Henry prior to the meeting, and the level of detail, kind of what's in behind the rates, is much greater than it was previously. So I think that was some of there was some comments about it's nice that, I mean, that level of detail wasn't, I couldn't pick up on that because I wasn't there previously, but the discussion was around the length of time to rebuild, essentially get back to being in the black, which they had agreed, we had agreed to do sooner than later. And then there was a fair amount of discussion about the cost of service rates versus a single rate for the state. I don't know if it was ever discussed previously that they would do anything other than a single rate, but that also seemed to be because they now had the detailed cost analysis to determine what the different rates were per utility.
It had been on the table from the get-go, but they wanted to keep things simple initially. So they went with the single rate. But I think there was always a thought that they were going to try to move to more of a cost to serve utility rate.
And that actually went back and forth quite a bit because there was a few board members that felt like we should keep it simple, like there's enough other changes happening now. I kind of felt like with others that the changes that were, there was sort of about building trust, and my feeling was that's already been broken. Like we need to rebuild trust. And if we have the detail, if there was any lack of confidence in what was behind those cost of service, breakdowns,
Right.
Then I would say, yeah, we should wait. But if we're confident in them, then I would be hesitant to come to this group or to the residents and say, well, we have all the information to charge rates that we know we should, but we think that's too much change. I mean, that's a worse bet. I thought that was a. worse
Yeah,
bet.
I agree with you. I think it's better to be, you know, as open book as you can be.
Yeah. And the bottom line too was that it didn't make that much of a difference as far as the rates went. I mean, they were high either way.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I just ask a clarifying question? I don't know if I completely understand, but the cost of service for Eversource versus the cost of service for Unitil, meaning what it takes in those areas to come up with the rate? Is that what the difference is?
apparently it's the energy supply. So energy supply varies from utility to utility. I asked that very question and it led to like a half-hour description that I got lost in like 30 seconds in. But it was essentially that the energy supply costs are different
Okay.
for each utility.
Yeah, and in the last board meeting, I was just, one day I was bored and I took a look at the last board meeting packet and they have in great detail kind of the buildup. I don't think at that point they had decided to go with cost of service rates, but they had it on the table. And so if you look, it kind of builds out there's subtle differences in serving the different geographic areas.
Okay, so it's kind of like the baseline for that area is a little different than for another area.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah, and I'm foggy on
Yeah.
on the difference. It's all itemized in terms of where there are some.
Yeah, as I read it, between the lines, it sounded like some utility areas have more big accounts. And so, you know, their average consumption per account is different than in a different utilities area. So, you know, the number of meters doesn't tell the whole story.
So if you charge the one rate for everybody, you might make more money or it might cost more in one area than another. So you should just do it more evenly because it's based on the
Right.
area you're serving.
Well, they even show,
Utility
I
or
think it's
service.
in this packet, if they picked a single rate, certain towns would be paying a little bit more than they showed essentially building reserves and others would be
Oh, okay,
contributing less.
I see. Okay.
Um,
And the differences are so,
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
okay.
like all 13.3, 13.4, you know, in that neighborhood.
So Tom, could you just clarify this? My understanding was always that the supply cost. That's not something they're making money off, that they're obligated to get the lowest cost. Supplies for the energy.
utilities, correct. Yep.
Utilities, yes. So if all these utilities are getting the lowest cost supply. For their customers, why would there be significant differences in the cost of supply?
Well, they're, as Kevin was saying, they're not significant, they're relatively minor, but there are differences in what it takes for energy supply to be delivered to Eversource customers than it is for a Unitil customer or Liberty.
But
And the amount of load that Eversource is going out to procure is quite a bit different than Unitil.
Mhm.
Eversource also is a bigger player in the region. I mean, they could get better
Okay,
pricing.
yeah.
So it's just, you know, at any point in time, there's always been differences between the
But-
utilities when they go out for supply.
But if we're talking about the distribution and the transmission issues that are separate from supply. I can very much understand that those things would be different for each utility, especially when you get a bigger utility and a smaller utility. But the actual energy costs shouldn't be that
varies.
much different, right?
It still varies. I mean,
It does.
if you look at any period over the past 20 years, it always varies by
Or is
utility.
it because of the quantity, the bulk buying or the
That's part of
location?
it.
where
As I
you-
mentioned, I mean, Eversource has
Yeah,
more
yeah.
buying power in the New Hampshire market than Unitil or Liberty.
And delivering the
Depends
energy.
on when they went out to the market. They don't all go out into the market on the same day. There's
Don't they
a
all have
window.
6-month period to,
They do, but they,
Fix the-
they go out in a window of time, and if the market is X on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, when Eversource goes out, and it's Y when Unitil goes out on
I see.
Thursday and Friday, so there can be subtle
Okay.
Does
differences.
generation type have anything to do with it, like nuclear versus natural gas versus hydro?
No, not in general, no.
They have to get the lowest cost by law.
Well, and plus they have to meet the renewable energy percentage, whatever it is now,
Yeah,
27%.
It is true that in the 2 or 3 years we've been doing this, Unitil's default rate is just a penny different, you know? than Eversource, and
Eversource,
Liberty tends to be a little higher, and the
Yeah.
co-op's always a little lower.
Yeah.
But Tom, we interrupted you.
So yeah, there are some minor differences, and so like you were suggesting, Peter, it makes, if everyone's charged what they determine to be the cost to buy supply for that given utility, then we're all covering the reserves the same. So, there was so the rates are a lot higher, so it's
That's the
It's a
story we
challenge.
have to tell, yeah.
the feeling, and it seems to, I don't know that where the facts are, but that the utilities rate, they still may be under collecting. So when we do them again, we may be getting closer. So whether that's true or not, I don't think there's anything really factual that we'll know. But it seems like they're really, like, the numbers are showing that, we pretty much have to charge this in order to get the books
get
back in
healthy.
order within, 3 years.
Yeah.
So,
so I think part of that is just what you said. It's not so much just what the supply cost was for CPC&H. They're also, I think, making a concerted effort to build the reserves back up.
yeah,
So,
Yeah.
whereas before, I think, there was a delta between CPC&H and the utilities, and they applied some of that delta toward reserves, some towards rate savings. I think their hands are tied right now in terms of they can't just put it all towards rates. They have to, rate savings. They have to add a penny or two to build reserves back up, I assume.
yeah.
Tom, you said just a minute ago, the rates are all higher. Are the rates being driven up by the supply cost
Primarily, yeah.
primarily?
I mean, so the utilities rates are increasing too, not as.
Right, I noticed that, but I'm just wondering what's driving the increases most?
I think well, I don't know, we didn't get a percentage there, but I think it's mostly the supply cost, but building the reserve, and with a little bit of reserve, the plan is then we'd be able to go into the reserve to be competitive.
Mhm.
We won't have that for, a couple of years now.
Yeah, and you wouldn't need the revolving loan,
Right.
you need the credit facility,
Mm.
do that out of reserves. I was pleased that, number one, they've really gotten much more detailed data pulls by hour to forecast. Number two, much more accurate cash flow forecasting. So I think they're taking the steps to shore up. They didn't adhere to the policies. And I thought they'd made a good accounting of that. In terms of the other utilities, Belo testified to the PUC that Unitil has to recover 800,000 of undercharging. And he told Manchester Union leader that Eversource has to recover 6.5 million of undercharging. Now, he's deduced those from rate filings and things, so I don't know how squishy those are.
Collect under collection in this rate or in the future?
That's for past periods.
Yeah.
How much they have to add back to their rate in the future to recover. So there seems to be, and the last piece about the other utilities is this all got going, the landscape was like you described. Go into the market every 6 months, whatever the price was, boom. Now the PUC is requiring them to buy half of their power on the spot market, basically the day ahead rate. And that works in their favor, great. If that doesn't, cost, I assume, gets passed right on to the customer. Like if there's a giant heat wave and and electricity spikes. Spot market. 18 cents or 20 cents.
Yeah, that'll show up now in
Yeah.
December.
Yeah, so I mean, if they have to set rates to cover under collection in a prior period, well, that's not good for Eversource's default customers. It sets the rate higher and theoretically CPCNH can
Right, and that's
beat
why
that.
Tom was saying the discussion was hopeful.
Right. Yeah,
Because my guess that's what's going on with Liberty this time, because Liberty's rate is in the 14s.
but I guess that's not, that's likely to go down. Cliff was saying at the meeting that the PUC wasn't final.
Okay. Because I thought maybe they under collected and
I
now we're
think
just
they
catching
did,
up.
and I don't remember exactly why. But there was some talk about, well, with the cost of service and how much you could raise the Liberty customers' rates and collect more reserves and still be a penny lower.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
then we can't really do that because it's gonna change.
there's a footnote here that says they had to collect, they had under collection problems, but the PUC ordered them to refile their rates and defer part of their
Yeah, probably just to
catch up.
Yes.
kind of feather it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because all the other utilities are in the 11 range and they're up at 14.8,
Right.
right? And that's the only one that CPCNH is lower than right now,
Yeah.
is Liberty.
Did somebody, I remember reading through this and one thing struck me and I forgot which one it was. That one of the utilities is still paying off some kind of a debt from what, 12 years ago or something? Some issue that I read in the news, I don't know, can't find it now which page it was. But that there was actually an outstanding debt load that was as a result of something 12 years ago and that's still being paid off. Anybody else see that somewhere?
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't remember
Okay,
seeing
I'll
that.
look up it again.
I did see a breakdown, though. They included it. It's in the packet that you gave us. So the 86% of the cost, what's in our rates is the energy supply. And then 8.5% of that, of the rate is for joint reserves. So it is a relatively small piece. What's really driving it is the energy supply.
Mhm.
And since since the utilities are buying half their stuff spot level, they don't have to build in as much of a risk premium. When they had to buy and probably the whole 6 months. As I understand it, and I'm not an amateur. There was a higher risk premium. I don't know, Kevin.
Yeah. That's true. And it's just gonna be a tad dicier going forward, I think, for CPCNH to try to consistently be lower than the utilities.
Yeah.
Given that the utilities now, their hands have been untied a little bit in terms of how they can procure. I think one thing that probably need from Henry is some statement as to why, in our case, Eversource, their rate's 11.1 and ours is gonna be 13.4. We theoretically have the better procurement model.
Hmm.
Right? Even with what the utilities are now being allowed to do. So it begs the question, why are we almost 2.5 cents above Eversource in our jurisdiction? And I don't think it's up to Portsmouth Community Power to explain that.
Hmm.
I think some
Yeah.
quote from, General Manager Herndon saying, again, continuing to acknowledge we're trying to
Right.
kind of write the financial
Well,
footing
I
of the
think like
coalition.
Counselor was just pointing out, if essentially half of their cost they're guessing at, right? If they're buying on the spot market, they don't know yet.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think Cliff didn't say it, but I think the thinking is that it's gonna be higher. So that, and I agree, we should have Henry answer it, but if if their forecast, I mean, we're going with the rates like they used to do. Our rates are, I don't think we're buying on the spot market.
No, we're locking in contracts.
Yeah, so we have locked in contracts, so we know there's no under or
Contracts,
over
yeah.
collection.
They're
They
hedging,
could
yeah.
be.
Yep.
But everybody have to do that same period?
Yes,
August to January, August to December. whatever it
Yeah,
is.
January. August or January.
Well, CPCNH doesn't have to, right? I mean, their supply contracts are, some are longer.
Contracts, but I mean to the customer. Does the customer period, is it the same as Eversource's customer period?
I think they can offer, and I think they've begun to maybe for
Right.
business customers offer like a
Yeah.
12-month rate.
For a business customer?
Yeah.
So we could do a longer one.
I think they've started to do that.
well, and there was the rate adjustment in February. Started with a 8-something rate.
And went into 9.7, yeah.
Said, blew the whistle and said, whoops, the
Yeah.
chip plant blew up.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying maybe if they
They
could.
change it at any time. Or are they, if Eversource says this is the rate, then it goes up. How do they collect
Well,
that?
Eversource's rate won't go up.
No.
It'll stay flat for 6 months,
So they'll
but
just have
after the
losses.
6 months, right, they,
They'll recover those losses.
yes. And the feeling is that they will have losses at the end of the 6 months because of that, because it's new, the whole
Yeah.
spot market.
And there was some regulation that was kind of making its way through that they could spread that cost
Yeah, under that.
across even the
Yeah,
coalition.
yeah.
Yeah, so now it's just to the
Yeah.
utilities customers.
Yeah.
So they'll be made whole, and the thought is over time with that procurement model, they'll on average have lower rates.
Well,
But
now my understanding is that the biggest advantage the utilities have over us is that they can go back to the PUC the next period and say, we guessed wrong. Our costs weren't higher than we expected. We would like to recover those costs in the next period. That's not something we can do. Okay, our power community can. We can't say, we guessed wrong, so guess what? We're gonna have to add on something.
Well, we did it
Oh,
in
we-
February.
oh,
Well,
we're
we
not
did it
guessing.
now, we're doing it now, but I'm saying they always have the ability to
They have
get
the
the
legal
PUC to legally let them do it.
yeah,
Yes, they
We,
have
on the
legal
other
right to
hand,
recover.
we just.
but even with that process, though,
Yeah.
they still don't make any money, right? They're made whole.
They're made whole.
They're made
yeah, that's
whole,
right,
so
that's right,
since 1999,
That's right, they're
they
made
just-
whole.
they're been told to go out to the market to get backstop power for folks that aren't in the competitive market. And in a period, if they overcollect too, they have to rebate it.
Rebate, yeah, that's right.
So it goes both ways, and it often does go both ways. What, I think it was like 2 rate periods ago, Eversource had an unusually low rate
Yes,
because
they flush back.
they were
surplus, yeah.
rebating, they overcollected and they were rebating,
Rebating back, yeah. Yeah.
So we were able to explain why our rate was, and I think we still even beat Eversource that time, even though they had had that. So,
Well, it just brings me to a point in the minutes that was written up here, and I don't think I was here that time. But where we mentioned that we have a fiduciary responsibility to beat the default utility. Now, I don't believe that we actually
No.
have that responsibility. That was our goal. We always said our intention is always to beat the default utilities rate.
And when
But we don't
launched-
have a fiduciary responsibility.
no, it was always that we would be competitive. And they said initially we would not launch if we were above the utilities,
That's right.
because that was
That's
just not good.
Yeah.
Business
Well,
101, you know,
you don't know.
yeah. But no, it'd be competitive, but the thought was, given our procurement model,
We have
that
an
we
advantage.
could regularly, the majority of the time, beat the utilities.
Mm-hmm.
So
As you say, it's a different landscape.
it is,
Mhm.
it is. But the lower rate though is kind of our product
Mhm.
as a community power program. It's great that, they're advocating in Concord on regulatory policy and potential renewable projects down the road. But, we have several 100,000 customers locked up in New Hampshire in community power that are now paying for the second time in a row, paying more than the utility.
Mhm.
And that's, you know, not,
And that raises the question for messaging of, you know, I think, and you've said this before, Kevin, with the last time we were hired, we have to tell people they have the freedom to opt out.
and we don't have to promote it, but I think in our press release, it should be clear. And it's easy to do, but you can switch back and forth, you know?
Yeah, you could step out for this rate period and.
Yeah. You know, I don't know what the attrition was last rate period, but I think 2 times in a row being higher than the utilities, I suspect that people start to perhaps do it in some greater numbers.
Right. Are the third party energy providers still around? I know before Community Power, right, we get these mailers
Yeah.
time. But as soon as Community Power launched, you know, that just stopped. I haven't seen any of those in my mailbox in a long
I've seen
See
a
them
week
now.
ago, a week ago.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you go to the
EHN or something like that.
Yeah.
PUC rate board that has all of the rates, available rates in the state, including the utilities, us and the competitive suppliers, there's not
Yeah.
there's not a ton.
Yeah.
There's a heck of a lot more in Connecticut and Massachusetts, but there's, you know, Direct Energy is still a player, another one called Ambient, and I don't know who else.
ENH electricity.
Yeah, there's
And
not.
do we know what some of their, what
It's-
rate
No, that's a
they're
good point. I
offering?
don't know what they are.
Well, that's tricky though, because they often require 2-year contracts,
Right.
3-year contracts.
Contract.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I'm
Penalties to
curious
get
what
out.
that.
And then you gotta look at what the content is. I was looking at a few the other day and it was, you know, 0 renewable.
Yes.
Whereas,
All coal all the
yeah,
time.
that's right.
Yeah.
But that's a good point that you just raised about how we sell ourselves to our customers. I think one thing we have underemphasized, I think, is that opportunity for people to make choices about what kind of energy they want. That's not available from the utilities. That's one advantage we have. And I don't think we pushed it enough to say, you know, especially in these times where in Washington and other places now, everybody's kind of stopping pretty much all the renewable energy, climate related issues now in their tracks. We still have an opportunity for our customers to make choices in that direction if they feel strongly about it.
Right.
And I think that's one big advantage we have that
Yes, I
we
do.
have emphasized, I think, a little bit too much to say. And the other thing is that we want to build up reserves that will help your community later fund projects in your community. And that's something, again, the utilities are not going to give you that money to do that in your community. For example, our solar or whatever we're doing.
And even that, I mean, that one, you have to be careful with, because even building up the reserves now is just to
Yes,
establish the
that's right.
financial
It's a
stability.
long-term goal.
It's, yeah.
That's the real focus
Yes.
is, and
But you
and then
start
using
building
some
up
of the reserves,
right now.
for rate management,
Yeah,
you
right.
know,
Yeah.
getting to the point where there's sufficient monies and reserves for renewable projects, I wouldn't hold our breath.
No, unless communities can do their own surcharge.
Set it
But-
back.
Yeah.
But still, that is an option we have in the future. And, you know, you gotta start, the future starts now. And especially in an environment politically where there's so little support from major government entities right now. We don't know how long it's gonna last, but here's an entity that's trying to give you an opportunity to support those efforts. And that, of course, the primary goal is, first of all, the other issues you just mentioned. But that is a long-term goal.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, and I want to be optimistic that they're gonna go back and rates that are. It'd be one thing if we were just off by 1/10 of a cent or a couple tenths of a cent, but when you're missing by 2,
2.2.
that gets
That's-
folks' attention.
It's $13.60 a month.
Yeah.
14.
And I mean, I think we just need to be square, not spin it.
Yeah.
Still $90 a head though,
Should
right?
we talk about
Right.
that? I don't know, have you talked to?
No, I
anybody
thought
about
that was in the press release though.
What's that?
The press release, I don't know if the press release has gone out.
No.
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 Ours or
So-
theirs?
Did we, did it get it added to the press release?
It's in there.
PPCNH release has gone out, ours has not.
So you have 14, well, no, it's not spelled out exactly, but you have $14 a month increase.
Right.
But everybody that's been participating has already saved $220.
Yeah.
We gotta check all these numbers. Yeah.
About a different number.
Well,
Lower.
Jackson gave us a number, so my question to Tom, and Tom asked Jackson, was if you look at what we've saved up to now compared to the default utility rate, if you were on basic service with CPCNH, and then you compare it to the default rate that Eversource is offering versus our default rate for basic through the rate period to January 31st, how much money do you lose? And it turns out you're still ahead by $90. So I don't know how we message that. It's not an easy thing to message, but it's a good reason not to migrate. You can still change, but it's a good reason to stay, keep your faith in community power, it
I
seems
mean,
like.
you could make references without getting, too mathematical. It's just even with this higher rate since the inception of community power back in whatever, April of 2023, customers of community
saved
power
a lot.
have saved money compared to
Yeah.
default, and not get into the
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah.
I think we tried to say that in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do have it in
Yeah.
there.
We need to
It's
double
in-
check.
it's in
So we
The
have
press
the
release.
2.9 million that we've been saved, that has been saved, which is an old number. I think that was as of last August or October. But what I don't understand is that's a basic, divide 2.9 million by the number of customers, 22,000, whatever,
12,300.
12,300. But you get $220 per customer or household. You were getting 170 something, and I don't know
Jackson
how it
was.
went down.
Well, that's probably because they went up.
Yes.
The rates went up
So he
last
probably
time. We
included.
were higher than the base
He's
rate.
included
We lost money.
February to now, because we got dinged a
So-
little there.
So there's a loss out of the 2.9.
Yes. Oh, we got that number?
Well, no, the 2.9 is so old. There's a loss from whatever
February to.
I mean, we're still positive.
Right.
And it would be nice, could we say something like, and we're optimistic that rates will.
Be careful.
Temper bait.
Yes, forward-looking statements.
Tom Rooney?
Yeah, the quote.
Otherwise, that was TR.
Like the one spoken by
Yes.
Counselor.
So one thing, Tom, that we were just chatting about a little bit is they made a reference in their press release that CPCNH is going up 38% and the utilities on average are going up 40-something percent.
Yeah,
That's a little too cute, because one, they're having a press release for the entire state, so it's not utility geographic area specific. In our case, Eversource is only going up 20-something percent. And if you're a casual reader of the press release, it kind of leads you to believe that CPCNH's rates are lower than the utility.
Yeah.
We're only going up 38, they're going up 47.
I don't know how those percentages work.
Well, the way it worked is that the utilities were all in the eights this rate period. We were at 9.7. Right, so the
So our
starting
increase
point
was
is
less.
different.
Yeah.
And
Oh, the change is what-
and they're including Liberty, who for some reason rates are in
They
the
went
four.
kooky balooky.
So there's only four
Just the
numbers in the
change,
calculation.
not a- okay.
And one of them is at Liberty, that's 14 and change. All the other utilities, including the co-op, their new rates are gonna be in the 11th.
Yeah, I know.
So they threw Liberty in there and then also use their base, our base at 9.7, their base at 8, and said, oh, we're going up less than the utilities.
Yeah, to me, it felt like they were looking for some sort of number
Yeah.
to save face
Yeah.
and saying,
I mean,
oh, it's
we're
not that bad.
We're serving the public, and I don't think I think the press releases should be a little more factual, but. And we can't use that press release in our case because Eversource isn't going up 47%, they're
Right.
going up 20 something. So. It'd be nice if they if they did a press release by geographic utility area, they could put data in there and say,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
Eversource is going to 11.1, we're going to 13.4. And Unitil,
Mhm.
Liberty Co-op, but
Mhm.
they're trying to have a one-size press release without putting the rates in there. And then they make you go to their website to see what the rates are.
I know, I noticed that.
Who's gonna do that?
No,
Right.
no.
When would we, if we're gonna do a press release, when would our press release?
So the draft is in your packet to discuss tonight.
Yeah.
And once we finalize that, then it needs to go through the city manager's office. And I would recommend that we wait until after the holiday. But presumably we could go out Monday.
Have we gotten the official notice from Community Power?
Yes.
We have.
And they posted their press release this afternoon. So it's live now.
Although we did ask Jackson to review our draft and I haven't heard back from him.
But I do think it's helpful, you know, some language around despite the higher rates this period since the inception of
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Community Power.
That's a good story.
We're still
Savings.
positive.
That's in
Yeah,
there, if you
yeah.
look.
Good.
John's quote in the next to last paragraph. I just need to know if that 2.9 is actually a little bit lower because of,
Are you able to put that up on the
But
screen?
it looks like it says the,
Can you put the, because I apologize, I didn't see it.
it says the good news is, this is what Councilor Tabor said. The good news is that since launch, Community Power has saved customers more than 2.9 million, approximately $220 per customer. And Community Power remains committed to the long-term goal of building reserves, but that's the past. And what Jackson projected was based on the new rate. Through the period, there's a savings. It doesn't quite go that far as to say, even with this new rate,
You're still ahead.
you're still ahead. Would be
Through just
through
January
July-
of 2026.
January 31st of 26.
Yeah, so I think that's a good thing to get in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what we say, and then we anticipate a significant.
Significant things are gonna be great. You had more to.
I know, why not?
so Jackson's number was.
$90.
2.9 million. What's-
Well, it's different because he's looking at what we saved so far in the last period, I believe.
So just the last period instead of.
What we asked him about was if we look at this new period, which is effective August 1st and goes through January of 26.
Right.
We won't save as much. We saved 176 before. We'll only save 90. Even though we're paying more, we're still gonna save money at the end of that period.
But the numbers we've had is we saved 220 per household.
But that's
So I don't
since
know where-
since the launch,
Since the
since the last period.
Since the launch, and
Okay.
so
Since the launch.
What's
Jackson's,
Jackson's?
was it? Through July, the average customer has participated, it was since the launch, since launch,
Okay.
will net approximately 176. So through July, it was 176 they saved.
Okay.
And then in savings based off of 650 kilowatts a month, that figure will drop, but will still be approximately $90 by the end of January 26.
You're still ahead.
Okay,
Still ahead.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
Does the Eversource went up by more than 10%.
I was basing that on the notice that I got as an Eversource customer in Newfields. But.
Oh, they're doing the same thing then.
maybe not
they're-
Be what.
Significant.
They're going to 11.1.
It's
I got
25%.
11.2.
Yeah.
24.
24, yeah. They're at 11, they're going to 11.1 from 8.9. This is just a residential.
Let's just make sure all our numbers. 11.9 minus, what was it? 8.25.
Yeah, 24.7, 25.
But, and we should probably, well, and maybe Jackson would add this, but. For residential customers, something to that effect, because that's all we're talking about, right? Well,
Yes,
that percentage, yeah.
just residential.
So we've had that the Granite Basic is residential and small commercial. Is that the same block or do they break out small?
Oh, no, I think that is, it's all.
It's
all
So it's just not,
Same rate.
Same rate.
Same rate.
yeah,
Right.
or lighting, or there are a couple of.
That's different.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Right, so I'll double check the number, because what I need to do is take 2.9 million plus Jackson's estimate plus 176 times 12,300 customers. Add that to 2.9 and we will get what the savings are. Except I don't know if that, from this rate period, if that includes the last rate period, because as I said, the 2.9 was an old number when we did the release in
Yes.
February.
so let's
Let's double check.
maybe set aside the 2.9 and talk about per customers.
Per customers.
We got those from Jackson.
Yeah,
And we could easily get that. I mean, he turned that around in 15
Maybe
minutes. I think he
give-
could give us the new
Yeah.
2.9 number.
Yeah, he could give us,
Just forward it to me.
that's great. So I was wondering if we, so maybe that's his answer to. our
Yeah.
question. That's good.
So I will revise it, that paragraph.
You had the launch date, like over what period of time was this money saved?
That's a good idea.
2 years or 1 year or?
It's like May of 2023.
May of June of 23.
2023. So 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
All right, this is a PDF.
Yeah, we had
Send-
big savings over the first 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I just wanna underscore what Kevin was saying too about our need to have Henry explain some things to us. Because one thing I'm really shocked about is this one bad investment that they made in the biomass plant.
No, that's
I don't
not
think
why.
that was what we were initially concerned about.
Yeah, yeah.
But then I think the primary issue was their portfolio management decisions.
Okay.
and there was a
well,
spike in the-
All the more then, I mean,
Right.
I was assuming it was mainly that issue with the
Yeah.
bioplants, but you're saying it wasn't.
Yeah.
That wasn't the main thing.
Yeah.
But that something like that so dramatically throw us back in everything.
Yeah.
That we need to have really some more safeguards in place. Are those actually being done now? I don't know.
I still don't understand, they say that they have a very detailed risk policy and then a risk procedure.
Yeah.
That our third party, Calpine, Ascend Analytics
Yeah.
helped write.
Yeah.
And off of from other clients, and it's like very, very detailed.
Yeah.
So you have those, and they're still around, Ascend and Calpine are still here.
Yeah.
You have a risk management committee that had a lot of talent on it.
Mhm.
You have, a CEO, you have the third party. I just still don't know how they could be
Did that
making
break down?
decisions that weren't in compliance
Yeah.
with the policy and the procedure.
How many decisions did they make that weren't?
I don't have no idea.
I think it's the classic, the problem was under collecting. What's the cause of the problem? Well, I think it's 3 or 4 things. It looks like they weren't accurately forecasting their cash flow. And that was.
And their
simply-
load, I think, too.
And it looks like they weren't forecasting the load. They're also growing
Yes.
really fast, so it's
Yeah.
hard to predict your load in that.
Yeah.
situation. And then they made a contract with the wood chip plant, which when the tires blew out on.
Mhm.
They had to go back into the market at the most expensive time, so it is multiple things, but I was happy to see in this statement that they're addressing the cash flow projections, they're addressing the load projections. And they're looking at where they deviated from the risk policies.
And the one thing I was thinking about the other day, I'd like to hear, because they said that the contract that we had for that power purchase agreement. That company was in bankruptcy, potential to be purchased. But that the purchasing company would have to honor the terms,
Yeah.
the
yeah.
terms. And I mean, they have a high flying legal firm, based in DC.
Mhm.
And they said at the time, there wasn't time to really kind of litigate that because they needed to go out
Yes,
to the
that was
market
one of Ben's questions.
and get they needed to secure supply for this
Yeah,
rate
yeah,
rate
yeah.
period. That was all well and good, hence the rate went up to 9.7. But do you know, Tom, is there any effort to go back with that, the purchaser of that plant to litigate? Because I mean, we ended up
They should be
taking on a lot of
responsible.
cost. And you would think those terms and conditions would have been transferable to the company that was taking that power plant out of bankruptcy. And they felt that they did have very tight terms and conditions just to address that situation. But so, well, after the fact, you have a, legal action, I don't know. But I haven't heard anything.
Yeah, there hasn't been
Okay.
any discussion about that at the board. There may be at a committee level, but it
Okay.
hasn't come up.
I think what Henry told us at the time was they looked at the cost of the litigation and the length of the time, and it just I didn't see the return on it.
That doesn't give me too much confidence in it either. To say, okay, we have this high-powered law firm, but it costs too much to litigate, it takes too long, maybe we won't just use that at all. And we lost a lot of money. So does that mean it could happen again? We'd have the same situation saying it's not worth litigating, it takes too long, so we just write it off. That's not good.
Well, you raise a good point, Peter. I think that discussion in February might have been, can we do something now? Can we get a legal judgment now? And I think they
It's
weren't.
kind of placeholder to say, hey, we have these issues and we'd like to come back to them at some point when it's appropriate with the bankruptcy and whatever else process is involved, but we're not gonna forget it.
Because it wasn't just a financial issue, it was
Right.
a public relations issue.
That's
for-
right.
For the
That's what the
coalition.
reputation has been damaged because of this too,
Yes.
and it was done in good faith, I assume.
Yeah, I mean. It's a tricky one. We want to know what happened because we want to understand for the sake of our ratepayers and our community. But, we're not able to change the outcome of the past.
No.
So. I think we just have to be wary that they're taking the steps to correct what went wrong. That's my feeling. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how the
Yeah.
committee feels.
And aren't they looking to hire, Tom, a financial director
Yeah, so they didn't.
and a power
They
supply
didn't give a
person?
detailed update there, but the committee that's looking at that suggested exactly that they're not looking for a CEO now. It's a finance, and they don't have titles specifically, so I think they're hesitating to use CFO because that will increase the, But yeah, finance, 3 sort of lead people, but not a CEO. So essentially have a strong leadership team without having a.
Sound like they're looking like an executive director or something.
Right.
As
Well-
opposed to a CEO.
Right, yeah, I think keeping, and I think that would keep Henry. Cause it sounded like if they went out for a CEO, he probably would not be sticking around. So it's good, I like the idea of. Having a more of a leadership team than replacing a CEO,
Yeah, we'll see what happens on that.
yeah.
When's your next board meeting?
August, I think. Yeah.
We will meet
it as well.
Good. That's good. Is there further discussion on that? Do you feel like you got your clarity?
I'll send you a draft that then you could share with the committee.
Yeah.
I think that works legally.
Yep, and I would expect calls from the press.
The term liquidity, that came from Henry, where he said to
So that
strengthen the,
quote that's in there is from the statement from CPCNH. Was the one paragraph that explained why the rate increase.
Yeah, it just struck me too that this is like financial jargon for the customers. We shouldn't
Yeah.
We should explain what we mean by that in normal common words.
Well, if you haven't had a chance to read Stephanie's draft. that
I
we
had
can-
it right in front of me here. Got it right there.
Okay, so you're saying that second paragraph.
Yeah, yeah, to talk about liquidity, that sounds like, you know, okay, are we liquid or not? Do we have enough cash or whatever? I mean. that
Well, I
doesn't-
guess it's factual. It just,
It's
it's a little
factual, yeah, yeah,
scary,
yeah.
but I guess they're being
I thought,
They're being direct.
I thought it was refreshingly accurate. I mean.
Yeah.
They got overdue bills and they gotta pay.
Well, you could describe the situation without you're using the word liquidity. It's not hard to do.
I was trying to find something that we could quote directly. That wasn't putting words in people's mouths, so that's.
That was
that's
that was their
the
That's a
quote.
direct
there,
quote.
yeah.
Fundamentally,
I mean,
And they didn't even quote a person. This is a CPCNH assessment.
that was their document. Okay, well, okay.
oh, we'll take another look, Peter. And if we can make it more clear. But I do think it's.
Even the revolving line of credit. I don't know, that doesn't mean anything to the ordinary customer. Well, what are we talking about? We don't have. I mean, you know, these are not the kind of stuff that comes out in a press release in a normal newspaper.
I didn't.
Their language consistently is not consumer oriented. It's
That's
business to
only
business.
consumer oriented language. That's what I'm getting at here. It's not that we are not telling facts, we're just describing it in a way that most people are not used to.
Right.
It sounds like it.
Yeah. Get a little insight of these small. Okay. And it's, point number one is pretty clear.
It might sound a little less jargony if we just took out the abbreviation because we don't ever refer to the revolving line of credit again. So we don't
Yeah.
need our LRC.
Don't.
It's just, I mean, those are all factual.
Yep.
Bullets, but they're a little alarming.
Exactly.
You know?
They raise alarms. It's like, don't I have credit for my mortgage? What's going on?
Just,
I'm not liquid. I don't have cash. What, they don't have it either?
I do want to note that the next single line will have a link to the CPCNH press release, which doesn't really explain it any better, but
For those.
Takes
who
more
wanna- yeah,
words.
Yeah,
with a link, they have a link back to
Mhm.
their website.
but if you just had like a general statement, according to CPCNH, they're taking many steps to continue to, strengthen the
Strengthen
financial
the
stability
viability.
of the organization,
exactly.
you know.
That's a simpler way to say it.
Right, rather than, you mean you're not paying your bills and you're, it's,
Well, they got a loan to pay the bills.
yeah.
Yeah. It's like send us your
Something like
money
that,
because we-
of course, they're,
You don't need a
They're-
quote, yeah.
they're taking.
Yeah.
You
Did you say steps to strengthen financial stability? What was the financial something?
Yeah, they can,
You need to take steps.
they're continue to take steps to strengthen the financial stability of the operation, of the organization.
Got it.
Any other?
And the new rates will help support that or something.
Right, that's right.
Then I'm just noticing here. The $14 per month. Should say compared to the Eversource.
Oh, I have one question too. In the first paragraph, we talked about increase it by 10% of Eversource.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just changed that to 24.7. That's apparently one of those regional variations, because that's what I
But my,
took from the email.
my question wasn't about the percentage, it was about the fact that we're using a percentage, but then we talk about CPCNH and we don't talk about a percentage. We
Mm,
talk about changes in
That's right.
So we can put
dollars.
in
Absolute amount.
38%.
I don't know.
That's why.
That's the
Gary,
number.
yeah.
Maybe we just say
Yeah,
bulk electric
Yeah,
utility
forget the percentages.
announced an increase to.
Yes,
20.
yes.
Yeah, just leave the percentage out, yeah.
Yeah.
If we're saying,
And do we have a reference in there in terms of being able to switch?
Yes,
It is in
it's
there.
in the last paragraph, but I will
Small
emphasize
the
that.
font, maybe?
Why wouldn't anybody switch? Seeing those rates, such a big difference, why wouldn't they just,
Well, I think what we have working for us is inertia, that they have to actually do something, so.
But
yeah.
we have to
But you have the option.
continue to communicate, they have the option to
I mean, is
do
there
it,
any other advantage other than,
not switching.
Well, the reason not to switch is because you're still saving money. At the end of the period.
Well, green power.
Save more
too.
if you do switch.
Yeah.
And you
Right,
save more.
so if
And the
you
green power.
opted for a percentage of green,
right,
right, so that's another
yeah.
positive.
You don't have that option, you don't have the option with you.
No, with the utility.
And part of it is just being part of the team. As far as community power, because community power is helping to advocate for better energy regulation in Concord and being a member.
Mhm.
They're doing that. They've had success recently. So
Should we play that up in the, or should be played up in the press release then? Those kind of advantages? The green options, the joint buying power.
We do say.
It is there.
Okay.
Yeah, we do that, yeah. And then
Never hurts to emphasize that. I'm gonna be very interested to see what other cities and towns say. There's 40 other cities and towns affected by this.
yeah, I
And
think,
we may not have the monopoly on wisdom that have it.
yeah. And I'm sure every community power program is having these same discussions. Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Tom, for.
Yeah, I wish it was better news. I wish I'd joined the board when it was fun.
I know.
We're smooth when I was there.
somebody got out just in time.
Yeah, you did.
You left at the peak. Jones Avenue, some of you may have noticed, we got a motion from the council recommended by us to divert some money from charging stations for EVs, which have like a 2-year lag time. And free up $113,000 for the Jones Avenue project. Primarily to get third-party expertise. So I talked with Karen about could we put together a work session for this committee plus the city council? And I gave her a very aggressive date and she said, we can't do it by then, we can do it by the fall, so. That would be our next step, is to lay out. Tell the story in a series of slides of what the opportunity is and educate the council, educate the community. See what some of the financing options are, see what the permitting requirements are. And staff wants to really have input from whoever they pick as their outside expert. And want to go through a fair process to do that, to get the expert, so.
So, can I ask a question? So the work that session would be to approve the funding for the,
I doubt we never take votes at work sessions.
But that
but
would
it would
be.
lay the groundwork for the council to say, this sounds good, let's do it, or we have more questions.
And is that the interconnection study?
Yeah, that would be.
Okay.
That'd be the recommendation.
And it's still is it still an open question as to whether it could potentially be behind the meter from the high school?
It is.
Yeah, that would be a good one.
Can we go? Is it a quarter mile, I think? Couple hundred yards.
What happens if you go behind the meter and you don't use it all?
It would be like net metering, right? Or go back.
Back in? Okay,
We get credit.
I think it gets more complicated.
It goes back.
sure, it's complicated.
Yeah.
You might as well put a battery.
At least you don't have to pay that.
So Counselor, the money
Yeah.
has been earmarked in the budget for it, but it still would then need to get approved after a work session.
Correct.
And John, did you say fall?
Yes,
Oh, as far as I know, there's an election in the fall too, right?
Yep.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah.
So either not much is gonna
Probably
happen in
goes
the
too
fall,
early,
or
yeah.
they gotta wait till after the fall. till The election happens, right?
right.
So we might not see a decision till maybe January?
That could be the case.
Okay,
It depends on how this all comes together.
Okay.
Yeah. If we get into October, November, it's gotta be a new council. But that's the latest on that. Herb, we did talk to the Island Institute.
Yeah, I wasn't able to attend that session. How did that go?
It was good. I'll pass this around. It happened too late for the packet, but. Island Institute. Into making coastal towns and islands leaders in affordable and reliable power. And, they work with a number of federal agencies to develop plans for small communities to get alternative energy sources. Interestingly, they work a lot with National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL. We had a good 45-minute discussion. Peter, maybe you can add some color, but we tried to figure out how they could be useful to us. And their person said, start with your net zero goal. And we want to be net zero, and that's what our action plan wants to get us to. Take a look at our various opportunities, rooftop solar, the Jones Avenue project, lowering energy consumption, energy efficiency. And they could kind of give us a most valuable to least value scale on our projects.
And do some technical work too, I think, really, but like, so it kind of was, you could, be really specific on the projects, or you could say, our goal is net zero by 2050 or 2040. Talking about. And they could look at it that way, so they'll help however we think it would be useful. But the application was due July 27th,
Yeah,
I think, and there was funding in place for this round, which isn't so certain, like all these federal funds for future rounds, so it seemed like something that we need to hop on.
The last time we looked at this, I thought, I remember feedback, and Peter, I don't know if it was from you or Peter Rice, but I remember feedback, concern about city staff time.
still a concern.
And so that was one of the reasons why we went with the C2C program. Because we looked
NREL?
at, we had meetings with Island Institute and NREL. And we asked, should we go the C2C route or should we go E-tip route? And we ultimately decided to go C2C. Because it would be, they could do a lot of the heavy lifting. And city staff wouldn't necessarily have to do much or any.
There was requirements to participate and organize outreach for
Yeah,
this one and other things along the way. So it would be,
yeah,
you know, and right now we're doing the master plan. So it's a lot of extra effort on that. It would be a whole nother effort. So it'd
yeah.
be tricky, but they seem pretty eager to help.
Yeah. And they've done some interesting things at various towns, highlights, the map on the back. Various projects. They kind of specialize in rural communities, isolated communities that, you know, are not gonna be served by anybody to get reliable energy, so.
And resiliency.
Yeah.
Resiliency.
Done a lot with storm resiliency. Yeah.
So I'll put that forward to everybody and see what they think.
They also said they work closely with NREL and then if you wanted them to follow up. Because now apparently they can finalize the wind study. They have the mandate or whatever they had to have lifted or approved. So she thinks that it's kind of backlogged. It might be that, might be a way to put in a good word. Isn't that kind of how she put it?
Yes. Yes, she did.
NREL, then it might release that,
For-
to release that report
Oh,
that they're sitting on.
yeah.
Unless you have,
Well, we got feedback from the contractors that are working on it that with the new administration in the White House.
Yeah.
The releasing of these reports has been put on hold.
that's what we told her that.
Yeah.
She said, yeah, that's true, but I think that's changed and they can release them now.
Okay, because I just heard back this week or last
Oh,
week.
okay.
Yeah. So I haven't heard back from the latest, the guidance that you gave me on what we have, we will use internally, but based on New Hampshire law, if somebody outside of this, you know, city staff or this committee asks for a copy of it, we would release it.
Public, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
we'd have to. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because they were asking us to just use it, please just use it internally. And do not release it publicly until it officially is reviewed and approved by NREL staff.
We're not compelled to do a press release, but if someone asked for it, whether like a right to know or even just a request.
Yeah,
So Herb and I thought we should have a conversation with Sharon and NREL. And say, you know. You can't be halfway pregnant here.
yeah. You can't, yeah, yeah. And I didn't get that piece, that the fact that if we have it here internally and reviewing it, somebody public requests access to it, we have to provide it. And so, you know,
As with any city document,
yeah, so I think,
unless it's,
Well, although it is in draft form. Is it?
yes.
That might be the way to not release it. Because the draft documents aren't necessarily subject to right to know. It's final documents.
okay,
I'll
So,
check with the city attorney.
yeah, it might be
That-
okay.
You might be, I think I remember something in RSA 91.
If it's stamped draft or if it's really officially draft.
and
So I'm just not familiar with this organization. What kind of organization are they? Is it a
Nonprofit.
nonprofit?
The Allen Institute?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're up in Rockland, Maine. They do a lot with like fishermen and fishing communities on the islands, right, it's outside of Rockland, but this program is much broader, seems like.
And my understanding is this program is funded by NREL, DOE. And the Island Institute was contracted out to manage ETIP for NREL, I think.
That sounds,
That sounds, yeah.
Yeah.
And they say that NREL's doing this kind of work, technical work for communities is funded for the next fiscal year.
Build a big, beautiful bill. God, I don't,
We don't know.
we don't know. I haven't read the specifics, but I heard in the big, beautiful bill, there's some language in there, I think, that would not be good for solar and other renewable
huge cuts,
energy. Okay, yeah,
huge cuts to renewable. That's
Yeah.
how they're gonna fund the tax breaks.
yeah.
And the 30% funding, 30% of solar projects that Exeter used to get their solar array over the hump. I think that's been gutted.
Oh,
There
wow.
was this back and forth between the House and Senate, whether it would be immediate or, you know, at the end of 2027. I don't know how that came out. So. Yeah.
And so it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking at the viability of projects to queue up. So like, for example, the one that we've been working with NREL on, and we've also had conversations with DPW about solar, you know, on the expansion for the sheds out there and things like that. You know, it's great if we can queue some of these projects up to the point where, say, in 24 months or 48 months, there is, you know, better funding available. At least, you know, we're ready to go, because sometimes the opportunities pop up and you know, you've got to be, if you can submit this in the next 6 weeks, right, or something like that, there's a short, you know, deadline. So I think it would be great for us to help the Energy Committee here to help get a couple projects to the point where, you know, if there was a funding opportunity in a short amount of time, we could submit an application.
We, you know, these guys want to help, and it sounds like they're not gonna charge us, and so, those are two good things. Yeah. Problem is the short deadline. So.
But it doesn't mean that we don't look at this for the next go round, the next cohort.
We could do that.
Because I can't remember if it's every 6 months or every 12 months. They
Good question.
run a new cycle,
Mid-years.
something
I
like
don't think she said on her,
it's at least every 12 months.
at least every year, but I don't know if there was an interim.
So it could be something too that we package something up for a city leadership. Something maybe more specific about how this could help the city of Portsmouth, and also for city council to look at and discuss whether this is something, maybe we can't make this deadline, most likely probably not, but what about the next year?
Yeah, I think we did a city council vote for Enbridge.
We did that for NREL, yes, yep. So we could do something similar for, but that was very specific. That was to engage in NREL and the studies that they've done for us. So along with this, we'd have to have conceptually, you know, what would we use ETIP for?
Right.
Very, very
Might
specific.
not be specific projects, it might be these areas.
Yeah,
these
yeah.
Types of projects.
Yeah, yeah.
Could they be brought in as to take care of part of the interconnection study or the
Jones Ave,
feasibility? Yeah.
I don't know.
They do that. I don't know, I think we're far enough along with Jones Ave that we know we wanna do it. So I think this is more,
But we have to pay somebody to do
yeah,
the next piece.
I don't know that they would do that technical work. It's more, I think,
Scope.
scope and analysis,
Yeah.
not as much technical. They would help us hire someone to do it, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, another area that might be useful for us, especially with the obstacles that we're gonna be encountering from Washington and other places, is to focus also in this period on reducing energy consumption.
Right.
So instead of the supply area, like the solar energy, how can we reduce usage? And there, because we don't need a mega project to do that, some of those things we can do ourselves without any federal or state support. If we can
Yes.
get a program like that, you know,
Yeah. and they had an
recommended by
Interesting,
organizations that do that.
they talked about Eastport, Maine, which is a low income community. And they had a very simple program of building wood frames with plastic storm windows that they pop into houses and save tons of energy.
Yeah.
There's a group doing that in York, Maine as well.
Yeah, York's doing that, yeah. So that's something that's more controlled locally, which we can do without permission, so to speak.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting. And Eastport got some funding with Island Institute's help to do all
Oh,
that,
okay.
and that was very successful, I think. I agree, Peter, working on energy conservation is negawatts instead of megawatts is
Yeah.
always smart.
It's just as good. You don't need it, you don't have to generate it.
Yeah.
And of course, that is also contributes to greenhouse reduction.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we can count it towards our net zero goals.
um,
Anything else to add on that, Peter? It's part of the call.
So
So we wanted to report back to you on that and see what your feelings were as a committee. Whether we should pursue it now, go for the next round, learn if they have a mid-year round.
And the deadline you said is July 27th. What would they need by then? Like what we want?
I don't remember how she said, it didn't sound like it was that complicated an application, but.
Yeah.
Mixing that up with something else. Maybe she didn't go into that detail. I can't remember.
Yes, I can't remember either.
But
we could,
Like a grant application. So it wouldn't be that, I mean,
They probably have.
I can't imagine
examples,
it's that challenging, yeah.
Yeah.
We need to come up with a. That's up.
We got 10 minutes.
That's sure.
I mean, if any of you would like to work on it further in a subgroup. We can help.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I don't know if were you gonna follow up with them about like what we're thinking to see maybe if they had some ideas? I mean, I love the idea of efficiency, like you were saying, something.
I think we need to bring them an idea. But we could follow up with them if we have an idea or two, or you and I could talk about it if you want. Maybe I can find the staff to carve out some time to work on it. It's just. It's gonna be tight.
Well, that kind of stuff is
Doesn't have to be super
low-hanging
elaborate.
fruit.
They're eager to help.
So if we're looking at programs for insulation, for energy consumption reduction on everyday appliances or thermostats, all this stuff, it's pretty low stuff and it's pretty classic stuff everywhere. So I'm sure they've encountered these kind of programs before
Yeah, we could talk to them about.
and see what
energy
kind of
efficiency
range of
programs
things
they've
they've.
placed.
yeah.
Could do that.
Right.
That's.
We'll take
Yeah,
one
that's
of
what I was
those.
thinking.
I mean, I know one of
And that
the,
window one, I just have to say, I was at a regional sustainability conference with communities up and down the East Coast, and 3 people had done that window fitting one. They said it was great in terms of what they do for the windows, but they said it was really hard. Really hard to organize, really hard to run, really, it sounded like a big challenging program. But, it doesn't mean we can't do it. Maybe we can find someone to run it, because I don't know if they'll pay vendors to help. How do you get that sense? But they might have some funds to pay the vendor.
We pay for materials.
Mhm.
Sure. Well, that's great if you guys.
Yeah, we can follow up and maybe talk to them together, or at
Yeah.
least have a conversation.
Yep.
we know Tom.
Nobody here for public comment? Okay, nobody on Zoom? Okay,
Our guest want to publicly comment?
Fred?
Are you aware of the draft solar zoning ordinance? And SoulSmart, we voted to SoulSmart, they commented on it. So Effie Malley and I, along with Kate Cook, shared those comments with Jillian Harris,
Yes.
and they were very receptive to it, so they kind of took some input, some of that input from SoulSmart, and are working on revising the ordinance at this point.
Yes, and Effie talked to us. And that was where she encountered Jillian. And Jillian said, oh, yeah, we know all about this. And they got together, and I think they had a very productive
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah.
Could you say something about the solar ordinance? What is that supposed to be about, or?
They're just trying to provide a clear framework, for residential and for other uses. For example, what does it mean in terms of like if there's a ordinance regarding the height of a building, and if the solar adds to that height, how is that going to be treated in the ordinance? And the goal is that it's not going to be treated negatively. Stuff like that, and also proximity to a property border and things like that. Also, we talked about we can't force commercial development to include solar, but the planning committee, the planning board could provide incentives, so they could say, okay, if you do some solar, we can maybe give you a variance on number of parking spaces or something like that. Just thinking about ways we can make it attractive without being able to actually force people to do things.
Well, I bring this up a little bit because I was recently involved with the pocket tours that Portsmouth had. And I was house sitting one of the gardens. And it happened to be over at Tanner Street, I think it was, or off of Hanover Street. A couple that had just moved in there, I think 10 years ago or something, and had a little small pocket garden, half the size of this room maybe. No, it's really small. But they had a beautiful garden and everything, but right next to them was a building that had been decaying for 7 years and no one's living there. It was just recently demolished. It's now a big hole in the ground, and it's not clear what's gonna happen there, but these people also happen to have solar collectors on their roof. So I was thinking about the issue that, let's say somebody builds a house next to them that covers up their solar collectors with shade.
Mm.
And shouldn't there be some kind of solar energy rights part of the zoning to say, you can't just take away somebody's solar energy capacity. I mean, let's say they don't have it, they'd like to have it on their roof. And the minute these people build next door and they have a 5-story building, whatever, all of a sudden that option goes away.
Yeah.
They lose that opportunity to do that,
Yeah.
but not just for solar energy, but even for their garden, which
Sure,
is now
right.
in the shade too.
Right.
So somehow protecting people's right to solar energy,
Mhm.
whether it's your garden or your collectors, might be a thing worth considering for a zoning,
Yeah, sure.
I don't know how you can enforce it and everything, because it's, in fact, I talked to somebody on the zoning board about this recently, and they were saying, well, depends on which zone they're in, what it's zoned as. But if we're gonna look at some kind of a citywide solar zoning, maybe these are the kind of things we need to consider.
Mhm.
That it's not, it affects people's gardens too. It's not just about the solar energy. But let's say if you've been thinking about putting solar energy on your roof and somebody builds something next door, they put shade on your roof, that's gone.
Mhm.
So can you protect yourself against that?
Right, yeah. To my knowledge, that's nothing in there about that at the moment,
Oh,
but it could be covered by,
Hey,
covered by some kind
what's
of
the
air,
point of it?
it could be covered by some kind of air rights, zoning ordinances, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I do hear them talk about air and light.
view corridors, view sheds, but they have to be in the state enabling legislation. I don't think there's anything
In
there.
what state?
You can't go,
In our is there anything in the state that would allow
Oh,
you to
state.
do a view shed ordinance or a solar protection ordinance or air right
Okay.
ordinance?
Okay,
We'd need that in place, so
yeah,
that's where I
yeah, it
think.
has to be a state law, you said.
And then to think about how you regulate it and enforce it, it would be super challenging, but I can see it if you had a solar field and someone built a building to block it, but even that, it's New Hampshire, you have your property rights, it'd be really hard to,
Well, I remember
Add that.
hearing that Boston Common has such an ordinance.
yeah, I believe.
That they said,
Massachusetts.
we need to restrict the height of the buildings around the Boston Common, otherwise,
Yeah,
before
could
you
do
know
things
it.
like that. You could have like
Everything
a-
is shaded
yeah.
and people can't
I think
enjoy the
solar
garden.
park might contemplate things like that, like solar areas or solar, and areas for like primary use for solar.
Yeah,
And the ordinance changes that Fred was talking about also included solar as a primary use and solar as an accessory use, and then what that would look like, how big it could be. Cause you couldn't put solar as a primary use on a lot unless the ordinance said that, so adding that as a potential for a primary
Right.
use. But accessory use and what size they can be, and so it just spells out a lot more with solar than we currently do.
I think it's a great idea to look at those issues.
Planning board's gonna look
I
at
don't
it
know what you can do,
this
but-
month. The planning board's taking that up this month,
Oh, good.
so.
And I can ask around about the state rules,
Yeah.
if there's anything out there.
Good. I'm glad that
Yeah,
all came through.
Mhm.
Anything else from sustainability land?
uh,
Well, I need to get home. Motion to adjourn?
Second. Oh, you need a motion. So moved.
A second. All in favor? Aye. Aye.